A lifetime of lies unravels when the truth about a hidden child comes to light, forcing everyone involved to confront their darkest fears. And if you cherish your family and love videos like this, subscribe to our channel to have 10 years of luck in your life. Eleanor Hart stood at the center of her lavish Los Angeles mansion's grand ballroom, surrounded by the city's elite during her annual charity gala. The crystal chandeliers cast a warm glow over the gathering of business moguls, politicians, and celebrities who filled the space with practiced laughter and calculated conversations. She wore a tailored black dress that cost more than most people's monthly salary, yet her composed exterior masked the trembling of her hands as she checked her phone for the 5th time in 10 minutes. The anonymous message glowed on her screen. "Everyone deserves to know that Jamal Williams is Lucas's real father." The words seemed to pulse with each reading, threatening to shatter the carefully constructed reality she'd maintained for the past 12 years. Eleanor's eyes darted to the entrance, where Jamal stood in his chauffeur's uniform, professionally distant as always. He was speaking with one of the catering staff, completely unaware of the bomb that had just been dropped in her inbox. The sight of him, tall, dignified, and carrying himself with that quiet confidence she'd always admired, made her stomach clench. Eleanor quickly turned away, accepting a glass of champagne from a passing waiter. She needed something to steady her nerves. The message couldn't be ignored. But tonight, with 300 of Los Angeles' most influential people in her home, she had to maintain appearances. Richard's arrival caused a subtle shift in the room's energy. Her husband of 15 years commanded attention without effort, his silver-streaked hair and expensive suit marking him as old money, though he'd built his tech empire from scratch. He moved through the crowd with the ease of someone who knew their worth, stopping to shake hands and share quiet laughs with potential investors. "Ladies and gentlemen," Richard's voice carried across the ballroom as he took center stage. "Tonight, I'm thrilled to announce Hart Technology's newest venture." Eleanor watched him outline plans for a revolutionary AI healthcare system, his enthusiasm genuine and infectious. The crowd hung on every word, and Eleanor felt the familiar pride in his achievements mixed with a crushing wave of guilt. The party continued well into the night, but Eleanor barely registered the conversation she participated in. Her responses were automatic, years of social training carrying her through while her mind raced with possibilities and consequences. Who had sent the message? How many others knew? What would happen to Lucas when the truth came out? After the last guest departed, Eleanor found herself in the library with Richard. The room, with its floor-to-ceiling bookshelves and leather furniture, had always been their sanctuary for honest conversations. Tonight, it felt like an interrogation chamber. "You were quiet tonight," Richard noted, loosening his tie as he poured himself a scotch. "Everything all right?" Eleanor watched him from her position by the window, noting how the moonlight caught the crystal decanter. "Just tired," she lied, hating how easily the words came. "I've been thinking," Richard continued, taking a seat in his favorite armchair. "With the new project launching, we should take Lucas to the Maldives next month. A family vacation before things get too hectic." He smiled warmly. "You know how much I love spending time with our son." The words hit Eleanor like physical blows. "Our son." The gentle trust in Richard's voice made her want to scream. Instead, she managed a tight smile and excused herself, claiming a headache. As she climbed the mansion's grand staircase, Eleanor's phone buzzed again. Another anonymous message. "You have 48 hours to tell them, or I will." The screen blurred as tears filled her eyes, and she gripped the banister to steady herself. 12 years of careful lies were about to unravel, and she had no idea how to stop it. In her bedroom, Eleanor sat at her vanity, staring at her reflection. The woman looking back at her appeared composed, successful, envied by many. But beneath that polished exterior was a woman who had built her perfect life on a foundation of deception. Now, with one anonymous message, that foundation was cracking. The sound of Richard's footsteps in the hallway made her quickly wipe away her tears. He paused outside their bedroom door, and for a moment, Eleanor thought he might come in. Instead, his steps continued down the hall, leaving her alone with the weight of her secrets. The next morning, Jamal Williams sat at his kitchen table in his modest East Los Angeles apartment, staring at his phone. Eleanor's name flashed on the screen, marking her third call in the past hour. His small living room, with its worn but clean furniture, felt a world away from the Hart mansion where he spent most of his days. Finally, he answered. "We need to talk." Eleanor's voice came through, tense and controlled. "Someone knows." Jamal closed his eyes, his free hand gripping the edge of the table. He'd known this day might come, but that didn't make it any easier. When and where? They agreed to meet at a discreet coffee shop in Silver Lake, far from their usual orbits. Before leaving, Jamal paused at his desk, looking at a hidden photo of Lucas he'd kept since the boy's birth. The resemblance between them grew stronger each year, and lately, he'd noticed Lucas watching him with curious eyes during their daily drives to school. The coffee shop was nearly empty when Eleanor arrived, her designer sunglasses and casual clothes an attempt at anonymity. Jamal had chosen a corner table, his back to the wall, years of security work making him mindful of exits and sightlines. "Someone sent me messages during the gala." Eleanor began without preamble, sliding her phone across the table. "They're threatening to expose everything." Jamal read the messages, his expression unchanging. "Lucas has been asking questions," he said finally. "He's noticed things. The tension at home, the way Richard's been acting. He's 12, Eleanor. He's not blind." Eleanor's carefully maintained composure cracked slightly. "He's been asking you questions?" "Not directly, but I see it in his eyes when I drive him to school. He knows something isn't right." Jamal leaned forward, his voice low but intense. "Maybe it's time to tell him the truth, before someone else does." "You can't be serious," Eleanor hissed. "Do you have any idea what this would do to him? To his life? To everything?" "Everything you've built, you mean," Jamal corrected. "Your perfect life with Richard, your social standing, your charity boards. That's what you're really worried about protecting." The truth of his words hung between them. Eleanor's hands trembled as she reached for her water glass. "I've given Lucas everything. Except the truth about who he is," Jamal countered. "I've watched him grow up from the driver's seat. I've been there every day, taking him to school, to practices, to parties. I've heard every story, every triumph, every disappointment. But I've had to pretend I'm nothing more than the help." Eleanor's eyes filled with tears. "We agreed this was best for everyone. We agreed when I was broke and you were terrified of losing your position in society," Jamal said. "But things are different now. I've built a life. I have savings. I could be a real father to him." Before Eleanor could respond, a flash went off outside the coffee shop window. They both turned to see a photographer quickly walking away, camera in hand. Eleanor's face went pale. "They followed me," she whispered, panic rising in her voice. "Oh God, they followed me here." Jamal immediately shifted into security mode, scanning the street. "Rough the window. Take the back exit. I'll create a distraction out front." But as Eleanor gathered her things, her phone buzzed with a new message. A photo of her and Jamal at the table, already posted on a gossip website with the caption, "Hart Industries CEO's wife in secret meeting with family driver." The scandal was beginning to unfold, exactly as their anonymous threatener had promised. Eleanor's hands shook so badly she could barely read the flood of messages coming in from her publicist, her friends, and worst of all, Richard. "I have to go," she said, standing abruptly. "I need to handle this before it gets worse." Jamal watched her hurry toward the back door, thinking of Lucas at school, unaware that his world was about to change forever. "Eleanor," he called after her. She paused but didn't turn around. "Whatever happens, Lucas deserves to hear the truth from us, not from the internet." She left without responding, leaving Jamal alone with 12 years of unspoken words and a future that was rapidly spinning out of control. Through the window, he could see more photographers gathering, their cameras ready to capture the next chapter of a story that had been waiting years to be told. As he prepared to face the chaos outside, Jamal's phone buzzed with a message from Lucas's school. The boy was asking to be picked up early, claiming he felt sick. Jamal knew, with a father's intuition he'd never been allowed to express, that Lucas had somehow sensed the storm that was coming. Richard Hart sat in his home office, surrounded by screens displaying various news feeds and social media posts. The photo of Eleanor and Jamal at the coffee shop was everywhere, and with each passing hour, the speculation grew wilder. His fingers drummed against his mahogany desk as he waited for his private investigator to arrive with the preliminary findings. The investigation hadn't started with the coffee shop photo. Richard had begun digging weeks ago when he first noticed subtle changes in Eleanor's behavior. Small things at first: missed calls, distracted conversations, the way she tensed whenever Jamal was mentioned. Now, as he reviewed security footage from their home cameras, patterns emerged that he'd been too busy to notice before. Eleanor and Jamal's interactions, while professional on the surface, carried an undercurrent of familiarity that went beyond employer and employee. The way they communicated without words, how Jamal seemed to anticipate Eleanor's needs before she expressed them, the careful distance they maintained in public, it all pointed to a deeper history. A knock at the door interrupted his thoughts. Sarah Chun, Eleanor's best friend and managing partner at one of LA's top law firms, entered looking worried. "Richard, we need to talk about how to handle this media situation." "Funny," Richard replied, his voice cold. "I was just about to call your firm about divorce attorneys." Sarah's composed expression faltered. "Don't be hasty. There could be a perfectly innocent explanation for Dash. Like there was an innocent explanation for your meeting with James Morrison last week." Richard cut in, watching Sarah's face pale. "Yes, I know about that too. It seems everyone has their secrets, doesn't it?" Sarah sank into a chair, her professional demeanor cracking. "How did you dash? The same way I know about Eleanor's past with Jamal. The same way I'm learning about 12 years of lies." Richard stood, walking to his wall of family photos. He stopped at one showing Lucas at age 5, sitting on his shoulders at Disneyland. "Tell me, Sarah, did you know? All this time, did you know I wasn't his father?" The silence that followed was answer enough. Sarah's voice was barely audible when she finally spoke. "It wasn't my secret to tell." Richard turned to face her, his expression hard. "No, but you helped her keep it, just like she's helping you keep yours. How long have you been sleeping with Morrison? Does your firm know you're involved with your biggest client?" "That's different," Sarah protested weakly. "Is it? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like a pattern. You and Eleanor, supposedly pillars of society, while underneath, you let the sentence hang." Sarah stood abruptly. "I came here to help manage this situation, not to be blackmailed. Eleanor is my friend, and Lucas is my son." Richard's shout echoed through the office. "Or at least, I thought he was. For 12 years, I've loved that boy, planned for his future, seen myself in his smile. Now I learn it was all a lie." Before Sarah could respond, Richard's phone buzzed. A text from his private investigator. "Found something in storage. Old diaries. You need to see this." "Get out," Richard told Sarah. "Go warn Eleanor if you want. Tell her I know everything. Tell her I'm coming for answers." After Sarah left, Richard poured himself a drink and walked to the window overlooking the garden. Below, he could see Lucas doing homework by the pool, headphones on, oblivious to the storm gathering around him. The boy looked up, caught his father's eye, and waved. Richard waved back, his throat tight. The security footage played on a loop on one of his screens. Eleanor and Jamal at the coffee shop, their heads close together, sharing secrets that had the power to destroy everything Richard had built. He picked up his phone and dialed a number. "It's me," he said when the line connected. "I don't care what it costs. I want everything, every detail of their relationship, every meeting, every call. I want to know exactly what's been happening in my own home for the last 12 years." As he hung up, Richard noticed his hands were shaking. He'd built his empire on control and information, yet somehow he'd missed the biggest deception of all happening right under his nose. The hurt was rapidly turning to anger, and anger was something Richard Hart knew how to use. He opened his laptop and began typing an email to his lawyers. If Eleanor wanted secrets, he'd give her secrets. By the time he was done, everyone's carefully constructed facades would come crashing down, and the truth, all of it, would finally come to light. The sun was setting over Los Angeles, casting long shadows through the office windows. Somewhere in the city, Eleanor was probably scrambling to contain the damage, not knowing that her husband was already 10 steps ahead. Richard smiled grimly and reached for his phone again. It was time to set the next phase of his plan in motion. Mark Sullivan, the private investigator Richard hired, spread dozens of photographs across Richard's desk. Each image told a piece of a story that spanned more than a decade. Eleanor and Jamal at various locations before Lucas's birth, security camera stills from the Hart estate showing subtle interactions, bank statements revealing unexplained transfers. She's been careful, Sullivan explained, pointing to various documents. But everyone leaves traces. The biggest red flag is this series of payments to a private account in Lucas's name. Monthly deposits, starting from his birth, made through a complex chain of shell companies. Jamal's name appears on the original paperwork. Richard examined a particularly damning photo from 11 years ago. Eleanor, visibly pregnant, meeting Jamal in a park far from their usual neighborhoods. What else? Medical records, Sullivan continued, sliding over a thick folder. Lucas's birth certificate lists you as the father, but there's an interesting gap in Eleanor's prenatal care. She switched doctors suddenly in her second trimester, around the same time Jamal took a 3-month leave of absence from his previous employer. Meanwhile, across town, Eleanor sat with Lucas in Griffith Park, watching him feed ducks at the lake. She'd pulled him out of school early, claiming a dental appointment, but really she needed to see him, to remind herself what she was fighting to protect. "Mom," Lucas said suddenly, tossing another piece of bread. "Katie Miller told me her parents were talking about you at dinner last night. She said they were saying mean things." Eleanor's heart clenched. "What kind of things, sweetheart?" "I don't know exactly. She wouldn't tell me, but she said her mom showed her dad something on her phone, and they looked upset." Lucas turned to face her, his features, so like Jamal's, serious beyond his years. "Is something wrong? Dad's been acting weird, and Jamal barely talked to me during our drive yesterday." Before Eleanor could formulate a response, she noticed a man with a camera trying to hide behind a nearby tree. Her protective instincts kicked in immediately. "Time to go, honey. We can get ice cream on the way home." Back at Richard's office, Sullivan was saving the biggest revelation for last. "There's more," he said, pulling out a final envelope. "We found these in a storage unit rented under Eleanor's maiden name. Inside were pages torn from a diary, Eleanor's elegant handwriting filling each page with secrets she'd never intended Richard to see. The entries detailed her relationship with Jamal, her pregnancy, and most devastatingly, her deliberate decision to pass Lucas off as Richard's child. Richard read one entry aloud. "The test results came today. There's no doubt. The baby is Jamal's. But I can't lose everything I've built. Richard wants a child so badly, and this pregnancy is perfectly timed. No one ever needs to know." Dated 2 weeks before she told me she was pregnant. Sullivan watched his client carefully. There's evidence suggesting others knew. Her friend Sarah Chin appears in several photos from that time period, and there are phone records showing regular contact between Eleanor and Jamal that go beyond their professional relationship. "What would you estimate is the total amount she's paid him over the years?" Richard asked, his voice dangerously calm. "Conservatively, over $2 million. But it was carefully distributed through various accounts and investments. She's not just rich, Mr. Hart. She's smart." Richard stood, walking to his window. Below, he could see Eleanor's car pulling into the driveway with Lucas. The boy bounded out, heading straight for the pool house while Eleanor lingered in the car, probably checking her phone for more damage control messages. "I want surveillance doubled," Richard ordered. "Every move, every call, every meeting. I want to know what she's planning." "Sir," Sullivan hesitated, "there's one more thing. The anonymous messages she received at the gala? We traced them. They didn't come from one source. There were multiple senders, all using sophisticated encryption. Someone orchestrated this exposure very carefully." Richard turned, his expression unreadable. "Keep digging. I want to know who else is pulling strings in my family's destruction." As Sullivan gathered his materials to leave, Richard picked up the diary pages again. 12 years of lies documented in Eleanor's own hand. The woman he'd married, who he'd trusted with everything, had orchestrated the perfect deception. Now, as he watched her finally exit her car and walk toward the house, he felt a cold satisfaction. She had no idea how completely her world was about to shatter. Above all, his thoughts turned to Lucas, swimming lazily in the pool below, still innocent of the storm about to break over his young life. Richard had raised him, loved him, planned for his future. Biology aside, could 12 years of fatherhood be erased by the truth? As he contemplated this, his phone buzzed with a message from Sullivan. New development. You need to see this immediately. The web of secrets was unraveling faster than anyone had anticipated, and Richard Hart was determined to control exactly how it all came crashing down. Richard waited until after Lucas went to bed before confronting Eleanor in his study. He'd arranged the evidence methodically across his desk: photographs, bank statement, diary pages, and medical records forming a timeline of deception. "Sit down," he commanded when Eleanor entered. She did, her eyes immediately drawn to the diary pages she'd thought were safely hidden away. The color drained from her face. "Where did you dash? 12 years. Richard cut her off, his voice eerily controlled. 12 years of watching me love him, plan for him, believe he was mine. Did you enjoy it, Eleanor? Did you and Jamal laugh about it during your secret meetings?" Eleanor gripped the arms of her chair. "It wasn't like that. You have to understand, Dash." "Understand what?" Richard's fist slammed onto the desk, making her jump. "That you've been paying him off? That you used my desire for a child to cover up your affair? That every time I talked about seeing myself in Lucas, you just smiled and nodded? I did it to protect everyone." Eleanor's voice cracked. "Lucas deserved a stable life, opportunities, Dash. He deserved the truth." Richard's shout echoed through the study. "And I deserved a wife who wasn't living a lie. $2 million, Eleanor. That's what you've paid Jamal over the years. Did you think I wouldn't find out?" Meanwhile, across town, Jamal sat in his mother's small kitchen, his head in his hands. His family had gathered for an emergency meeting after seeing the news. "You need to walk away," his sister Maya urged. "This is going to get ugly, and you've got your reputation to think about." "My reputation?" Jamal looked up. "What about my son?" His mother touched his shoulder gently. "Baby, you gave up the right to call him that 12 years ago when you agreed to this arrangement." "The money, Dash. I never wanted the money." Jamal stood abruptly. Eleanor insisted. She said it would look suspicious if the driver suddenly quit, that Lucas needed stability. Every penny went into a trust for him. Back at the Hart mansion, the confrontation continued to escalate. "You know what's interesting?" Richard paced behind his desk. "The anonymous messages that started this? They came from multiple sources. Someone orchestrated this exposure very carefully. The question is, was it you? Did you finally get tired of paying Jamal? Or was it him? Did he want more money?" "Nobody wanted this," Eleanor whispered. "Everything I did was for Lucas." "No," Richard's voice turned cold. "Everything you did was for yourself. But now Lucas is going to pay the price. Do you know he's already hearing whispers at school? That the other parents are talking?" Eleanor's phone buzzed. A text from Sarah. "Emergency. The press has more photos. They're running the story tomorrow." Looking at her phone, Eleanor felt the walls closing in. Another message popped up, this time from Lucas's school principal requesting an urgent meeting. Then another from one of her charity board members asking her to temporarily step down. "Your perfect world is crumbling," Richard observed, watching her face. "How does it feel?" At his mother's house, Jamal received a similar barrage of messages. His security company clients were reviewing their contracts. The private school where he drove Lucas and other wealthy children was investigating the situation. His carefully built life was unraveling thread by thread. "I have to see him," Jamal decided, standing. "Lucas deserves to hear the truth from me." "You go near that boy right now, and Hart will destroy you," Maya warned. "His lawyers, Dash. He's my son." Jamal's voice broke. "While Richard was at his board meetings and charity galas, I was there. Every day. Driving him to school, listening to his stories, watching him grow. I did what Eleanor asked. I stayed away, I played my part. But I won't hide anymore." The night grew later, but no one slept. Eleanor sat in her study, frantically calling contacts, trying to contain the damage. Richard worked with his lawyers, preparing for war. Jamal drove aimlessly through the city, torn between duty and desire. And somewhere in the Hart mansion, Lucas lay awake, listening to the muffled sounds of his parents arguing, feeling his world shift beneath him. When dawn broke over Los Angeles, the story hit the news. Hart family scandal. CEO's wife's secret past exposed. Eleanor's phone rang. It was the school. Lucas had gotten into a fight after another student showed him the article on their phone. As she rushed to pick him up, she realized the careful facade she'd built was finally completely shattered. The only question now was what would remain when the dust settled. The choices made 12 years ago had created a web of lies that was now drawing tighter around everyone involved. And at the center of it all was a 12-year-old boy who was about to learn that everything he knew about his family was built on carefully constructed lies. Sarah Chin sat in her corner office at the law firm, staring at a threatening email from James Morrison, her former client and lover. The message was clear. Either she continued their relationship, or he would expose their affair to the firm's ethics board. Her hands trembled as she closed her laptop. Ms. Chun, her assistant's voice came through the intercom. The managing partners have called an emergency meeting. They're asking for you specifically. Sarah gathered her composure and headed to the conference room, where 5 senior partners waited with grim expressions. On the table lay printouts of text messages between her and Morrison, along with photos from their private meetings. Care to explain this, Sarah? The managing partner, David Reynolds, pushed the evidence toward her. Morrison's wife sent these to us this morning. She's threatening to go public. Meanwhile, Eleanor sat in her home office, trying to focus on Sarah's crisis while her own world crumbled. They can't prove anything, she assured her friend over the phone. Delete everything, Sarah. Every text, every email. It's too late, Sarah's voice cracked. James's wife found everything. She's been gathering evidence for months. God, Eleanor, I'm going to lose everything. My partnership, my reputation dash. Come over, Eleanor interrupted. We'll figure this out together. Hours later, the 2 women sat in Eleanor's garden, away from the prying eyes of staff and security cameras. Sarah had been placed on administrative leave pending an investigation, and the news had already reached legal circles across Los Angeles. I should have listened to you, Sarah whispered, wiping tears, when you told me to end it with James. But I thought I could handle it. I thought I was smarter than this. Eleanor reached for her friend's hand. We both thought we were smarter. Look at us now. 2 powerful women brought down by the secrets we thought we could control. Their conversation was interrupted by commotion from the front of the house. Jamal had arrived, ignoring security protocols, heading straight for the main entrance. They watched as he confronted the guards, insisting on seeing Lucas. He's my son. Jamal's voice carried across the garden. I have a right to see him. Eleanor rushed forward, leaving Sarah behind. Jamal, please. Not like this. Not now. When then? He turned to face her, years of suppressed emotion breaking through. While you and Richard wage war through lawyers. While Lucas learns the truth from strangers. He's already fighting at school. Eleanor, our son is suffering. The word "our" hung in the air between them. Sarah watched the scene unfold, recognizing the same desperate pain she'd seen in the mirror that morning. The agony of secrets finally exposed. Inside the house, Lucas had heard the commotion. He stood at his bedroom window, watching the confrontation below. The article he'd seen at school burned in his memory. Hart family driver claims paternity. Everything made sense now. The familiar comfort he'd always felt with Jamal, the subtle similarities in their features, the way Jamal seemed to understand him without words. Sarah approached Lucas's room, Fendi. Ingham's still at the window. They're trying to protect you, she said softly. By lying. Lucas turned, his young face streaked with tears. Everyone's been lying. Even you? Aunt Sarah. Did you know too? Sarah's silence was answer enough. Lucas turned back to the window, where Eleanor was now trying to reason with Jamal while security guards stood ready to intervene. Your mother loves you more than anything, Sarah tried again. Everything she did, Dash, was for me. I know. Lucas's voice was bitter beyond his years. That's what adults always say when they lie. It's for the children. But it's really for themselves, isn't it? Below, the confrontation had escalated. Richard had arrived, emerging from his car with a court order in hand. "This is a restraining order," he announced, handing the document to Jamal. "Come near my son again, and I'll have you arrested." "Your son?" Jamal laughed bitterly. "You've known the truth for what? A few days? I've been there his entire life, watching from a distance, loving him in silence. That paper doesn't change biology." The scene devolved into chaos. Richard threatening legal action, Eleanor pleading for calm, Jamal refusing to back down. Sarah watched it all, seeing her own professional destruction reflected in this family's implosion. Her phone buzzed with another message from James Morrison. "Last chance, Sarah. Meet me tonight or tomorrow, everyone knows." As the sun set over Los Angeles, two women who had thought themselves invincible faced the consequences of their choices. Sarah's career lay in ruins, while Eleanor's perfect family shattered in front of her. And above it all, a 12-year-old boy watched his world unravel, learning the hardest lesson of all, that sometimes the people we love most are the ones who hurt us deepest with their lies. Richard sat in his lawyer's office, reviewing the evidence he'd gathered on Sarah's affair with James Morrison. His expression remained calculating as he scrolled through emails, text messages, and financial records that his private investigator had uncovered. "It's perfect leverage," Richard mused, turning to his attorney. "Sarah's affair with Morrison isn't just a scandal. It's a violation of legal ethics. Her firm's biggest client, sleeping with a managing partner? The California Bar Association would have a field day." The lawyer nodded. "And with Morrison's wife threatening to go public, Sarah's vulnerable. But are you sure you want to use this against Eleanor? She and Sarah have been friends for 20 years. "Exactly." Richard's smile didn't reach his eyes. Eleanor protected Sarah's secret, and Sarah protected Eleanor's. Time to break that chain of loyalty. Across town, Eleanor received a text from Richard. "Meet me at the house. Alone. We need to discuss Sarah." Her heart sank, knowing Richard wouldn't have called this meeting without an agenda. The confrontation in Richard's study was clinical, calculated. He laid out photos of Sarah with Morrison, along with documentation of ethical violations that could end her legal career permanently. "Here's the deal." Richard's voice was cold. "You agree to my terms in the divorce. Full custody of Lucas, no public statements, a complete admission of your deception, and Sarah's secret stays buried. Fight me, and I destroy you both." Eleanor's hands trembled. "You'd ruin Sarah just to hurt me?" "No, Eleanor. You ruined Sarah the moment you made her complicit in your lies about Lucas. I'm just deciding when the bomb drops." He slid divorce papers across the desk. "Your choice." Meanwhile, at his security company office, Jamal faced his own crisis. His phone rang, Richard Hart's name flashing on the screen. After a moment's hesitation, he answered. "Mr. Williams." Richard's voice was eerily pleasant. "I think it's time we had a man-to-man talk about Lucas." They met at a private club Richard belonged to, the kind of place Jamal usually only saw from the driver's seat. Richard waited in a secluded corner, a folder on the table before him. "You've built a good business," Richard began. "High-end security for wealthy clients, excellent reputation. It would be a shame if those clients learned their security provider couldn't be trusted around their wives and children." Jamal's jaw tightened. "Is that a threat?" "It's reality. Every client you have is in my social circle. One word from me about your indiscretions with my wife, and your company is finished." Richard opened the folder. "But we can make this easy. Sign away any claim to Lucas, agree to leave Los Angeles, and I'll make sure you're compensated generously." "You're trying to buy me off?" Jamal's voice was incredulous. "Like Eleanor did?" "No." Richard's smile was shark-like. "I'm giving you a choice between a comfortable future elsewhere or complete destruction here." Eleanor's monthly payments were guilt money. This is business. The tension in the room grew as Jamal stood, towering over Richard. "Lucas is my son. Lucas is my son in every way that matters," Richard countered. "I raised him, loved him, provided for him. You drove him to school." The media circus intensified daily. Reporters camped outside both the Hart mansion and Jamal's apartment. Lucas's school had to hire additional security to keep photographers away. Every gossip magazine in Los Angeles ran speculative stories about Eleanor and Jamal's past relationship. The pressure began showing in everyone. Sarah, facing professional ruin, considered taking Morrison's deal to save what remained of her career. Eleanor, trapped by Richard's ultimatum, watched her friendship with Sarah strain under the weight of mutual destruction. Jamal, his business suffering, faced pressure from his family to take Richard's offer and start fresh elsewhere. The situation reached a breaking point when Eleanor arrived at Sarah's house late one night, finding her friend in tears over a letter from the State Bar Association announcing an ethics investigation. "I can't fight them both," Sarah sobbed. "Morrison and his wife, the Bar Association. Eleanor, I'm gonna lose everything." Eleanor held her friend, knowing that Richard's ultimatum meant she couldn't tell Sarah the whole truth, that their decades-long friendship had become another weapon in her husband's arsenal. As the night wore on, the two women who had once seemed untouchable, a prominent attorney and a wealthy socialite, faced the reality that their carefully constructed lives were built on foundations of secrets that could no longer hold. And somewhere in the city, Jamal sat in his car outside Lucas's school, watching his son from a distance, wondering if Richard's offer of exile might actually be the best thing for everyone. The boy's life was already disrupted enough. Maybe disappearing was the last gift he could give his son. The choices made in desperate moments 12 years ago had created a web of consequences that now threatened to destroy not just relationships, but entire lives. And Richard Hart, master strategist that he was pulling all the strings. The press conference room at the Beverly Hilton was packed with reporters. Eleanor sat behind the podium, her publicist and crisis management team flanking her. She wore a conservative navy suit, her appearance carefully crafted to project dignity under pressure. "Mrs. Hart, how long has the affair with your driver been going on? Did your husband know about Lucas's true parentage? Are the rumors about payoffs to Mr. Williams true?" The questions came rapid fire. Eleanor gripped the podium, her knuckles white. In the back of the room, Richard watched with cold satisfaction, knowing she would have to stick to their agreed-upon statement or risk Sarah's destruction. "I want to address the speculation about my family," Eleanor began, her voice steady despite her trembling hands. "My primary concern is protecting my son, Lucas, from the harmful effects of these rumors and allegations. I asked the media to respect his privacy during this difficult time." From his position, Richard nodded slightly. She was following the script. But then Eleanor paused, looking directly at the cameras. "However," she continued, causing Richard to straighten in his chair, "I will not allow false narratives to destroy the people I care about. Lucas deserves better than tabloid headlines and paparazzi photos. He deserves the truth." Richard moved forward, but Eleanor pressed on. "The truth is complex. The truth is that love, parental love in particular, isn't always simple or conventional. Every decision I've made has been to protect my son." Across town, Jamal watched the press conference on his phone while sitting in his mother's living room. His entire family had gathered again, this time to discuss Richard's offer. "Take the money," his brother Marcus urged. "Start fresh somewhere else. Your business is already suffering. How many clients have dropped you this week?" Jamal's mother touched his arm gently. "Baby, sometimes loving someone means letting them go. Look what this exposure is doing to Lucas. The fighting at school, the photographers, the gossip. Mama," Jamal's voice cracked, "how can I abandon my son again? 12 years ago, I agreed to stay away because I thought it was best for him. But now," his sister Maya interrupted, "now it's worse because everyone knows. Lucas is caught in the middle of a war between three parents who all claim to want what's best for him." The press conference continued, with Eleanor carefully navigating between Richard's demands and her own conscience. But the reporters weren't satisfied with diplomatic answers. "Mrs. Hart, did you use your husband's money to buy Mr. Williams's silence? Was the pregnancy planned to trap Mr. Hart? How many other secrets are you hiding?" Eleanor felt the situation slipping away. She glanced at Richard, saw the warning in his eyes, thought of Sarah facing professional ruin, and made a decision. "My relationship with Jamal Williams ended before my marriage to Richard," she stated firmly. "Any suggestion that there was an ongoing affair is false. The financial arrangements mentioned in the press were structured to ensure Lucas's future, with full transparency to all parties involved. It was a lie," but one designed to protect everyone, except herself. She was falling on her sword, accepting full blame to shield both Richard and Jamal from further scandal. Meanwhile, Jamal's family gathering had turned into an impromptu intervention. Photos of Lucas's fights at school, screenshots of cruel social media comments, and newspaper articles about the scandal covered the coffee table. "Look at what this is doing to him," Maya pleaded. "Your son needs peace more than he needs another father right now." Jamal stood abruptly, walking to the window. The same photographers who had been following him for weeks waited outside his mother's modest home. Every movement, every decision, every aspect of their lives was now public fodder. His phone buzzed, a message from Lucas's school counselor. "He's asking questions about you. He's confused, angry. Please, whatever you adults decide, think of him first." Back at the press conference, Eleanor concluded her statement. The carefully worded half-truths had done little to satisfy the media's hunger for scandal, but they had given her something precious: time. As she left the podium, Richard caught her arm. "You went off script," he warned quietly. "You can destroy Sarah's career," Eleanor replied, equally soft. "You can take my reputation, my social standing, even my marriage. But you cannot control the truth forever, Richard. Sooner or later, Lucas will want answers." The sun set over Los Angeles, casting long shadows over a city that thrived on secrets and scandals. In 3 different locations, 3 adults who all claimed to love one child more than anything struggled with impossible choices. Jamal stared at Rick, Hard's offer letter, the promise of a new life weighing against the love for his son. Eleanor returned to an empty mansion, her public performance done, but the real battle just beginning. And Richard sat in his study, watching Lucas through the window, wondering if victory at any cost was worth the price of his son's trust. None of them slept that night, each haunted by the knowledge that sometimes the right choice and the easy choice are worlds apart. The evening before the media's promised major revelation, Richard cornered Eleanor in their home theater, away from the staff's ears. The room that had hosted countless family movie nights now felt like an interrogation chamber. "Time's up, Eleanor," he said, handing her final divorce papers. "Either you sign these now, agreeing to my terms, or tomorrow morning, Sarah's career ends. I've already forwarded evidence to the Bar Association. One call from me triggers the investigation." Eleanor held the papers, her hands steady despite her internal turmoil. "You really want to do this? Destroy not just me, but Sarah too?" "You did this," Richard's voice was ice. "The moment you decided to pass another man's child off as mine. The moment you made Sarah complicit in your lies. Now choose, your dignity or your friend's career." Meanwhile, Sarah faced her own moment of truth in her apartment. James Morrison sat across from her, smug confidence radiating from his expensive suit. "One public statement," he said. "That's all I need. Say our relationship was consensual, that my wife's allegations are false. Save both our careers. By throwing your wife under the bus?" Sarah's voice was bitter. "By lying again? By surviving," Morrison corrected. "Isn't that what you and Eleanor have been doing for years? Surviving through careful lies?" Before Sarah could respond, her phone buzzed with breaking news. Hart family scandal. New evidence to be released tomorrow. The walls were closing in on all of them. Back at the Hart mansion, Lucas sat in his room, scrolling through social media on a secret phone his friend had given him after his parents confiscated his devices. The comments under articles about his family were brutal. Classmates he'd known for years were sharing memes about his situation. Even his teachers' faces had changed. Now they looked at him with pity or judgment. He could hear his parents arguing downstairs, their voices carrying through the mansion's ventilation system. His mother's plea for understanding, his father's cold responses, the mention of Jamal's name that made everything in his world shift. A text popped up from a block number. Someone had leaked tomorrow's story early to select people. The attached photo showed his mother, years ago, with Jamal. She was pregnant. The date stamp matched the period just before his birth. Lucas felt something break inside him. All the confusion, anger, and hurt of the past weeks crystallized into a single, clear thought. He needed to know the truth, not from articles or overheard arguments, but from Jamal himself. He knew Jamal's address, had memorized it years ago when he dropped off forgotten homework. With everyone distracted by tomorrow's impending revelation, no one noticed when he slipped out his bedroom window and climbed down the familiar oak tree. The city bus felt foreign to him. He'd never taken public transportation before, but he had allowance money saved, and Google Maps showed him the way. As the bus wound through Los Angeles, Lucas thought about every drive to school with Jamal, every conversation, every time he'd felt that inexplicable connection. Meanwhile, Eleanor finally reached her breaking point. "Enough," she told Richard, ripping up the divorce papers. "I won't let you use Sarah to control me anymore." She pulled out her phone and called Sarah. "Tell Morrison whatever you want. Tell the Bar Association everything. I'll back you up. Together we'll face whatever comes. Eleanor, no hará proteste. D. Richard will dash. Richard will what? Reveal our secrets? They're already out. Destroy our reputations? They're already in shreds. We've spent 12 years protecting lies that are killing us. I'm done." But as Eleanor hung up, ready to finally take control of her narrative, a security alert popped up on her phone. Lucas's Windows sensor had been triggered. She rushed to his room, finding it empty, the window open to the cooling night air. Panic seized her as she called Jamal. "Lucas is gone," she said without preamble. "He must have seen something. Tomorrow's story leaked early." Jamal was already moving, grabbing his keys. "I know where he's headed." "How can you be sure?" "Because he's my son," Jamal replied simply. "And if I were 12 years old, confused and angry, I want answers from the source." As they coordinated search efforts, Richard was receiving his own alert from his private investigator. The leak story was worse than anyone had anticipated. It wasn't just about Eleanor and Jamal. It was about everyone. Every secret, every lie, every hidden payment and covered truth was about to be exposed. But none of that mattered now. Somewhere in the vast city of Los Angeles, a 12-year-old boy was searching for truth in a world built on lies, and 3 parents who had failed him in different ways now raced to find him before the city's darkness could swallow him whole. The night grew deeper, and tomorrow's revelation loomed like a storm on the horizon. But the biggest story wouldn't be found in any newspaper. It was writing itself on the heart of a child who had finally decided to seek his own truth, regardless of the cost. Lucas sat on a park bench near Jamal's apartment building, his courage faltering now that he'd actually arrived. The nighttime air felt heavy with the weight of his decision, and the city's unfamiliar sounds made him acutely aware of how far he was from his protected world. Jamal found him first, approaching slowly, like one might a startled animal. "Your mother's worried sick," he said softly, sitting beside Lucas but maintaining a careful distance. "Is it true?" Lucas's voice was small but steady. "The photo, the one from before I was born. Are you really my father?" Before Jamal could answer, Eleanor's car screeched to a halt nearby. She rushed toward them, relief and fear warring on her face. But Lucas held up a hand to stop her. "No more lies," he demanded. "No more protecting me. I want the truth. All of it." Richard arrived moments later, his usual commanding presence diminished by genuine concern for his son. The 4 of them created a tableau in the empty park, a family fractured by secrets, finally forced to face reality. "I'll tell him," Eleanor started, but Richard interrupted. "No," he said, his voice unexpectedly gentle. "I will." He turned to Lucas. "Son, I've known about Jamal being your biological father for weeks now. But what I've realized, what this whole mess has taught me, is that biology isn't what makes a father." He pulled out his phone and showed Lucas a photo. Not the leaked one that had driven him here, but an old picture of Richard teaching 4-year-old Lucas to swim. "I wasn't going to tell you this," Richard continued, "but I have a confession of my own. I have another child, from before I met your mother, a daughter in Seattle. I've been sending her money, visiting secretly once a year. I told myself I was protecting everyone by keeping it quiet." Eleanor stared at her husband, years of guilt and recrimination falling away in the face of this revelation. "Richard, I was so angry when I discovered your secret," he told her, "that I forgot about my own. I was ready to destroy everything. Your friendship with Sarah, Jamal's business, our family, because I felt betrayed. but I was just as guilty of building our life on lies. Jamal stepped forward. Lucas, I never wanted to be just your driver. But 12 years ago, we all made choices we thought were rigged. HT at the time, your mother wanted to give you a stable life. I wanted you to have opportunities one couldn't provide. And Richard, he loved you from the moment you were born, regardless of biology. Lucas looked between the three adults. So, everyone's been lying? About everything? Yes, Eleanor admitted. But not because we didn't love you. We loved you so much we convinced ourselves the lies were protecting you. Just then, Sarah's car pulled up. She rushed over, waving her phone. The story's breaking now. Someone leaked it early to every major outlet. But instead of panic, a strange calm settled over the group. The truth was out, all of it. Richard's secret daughter, Eleanor, and Jamal's past. The years of careful deception. Even Sarah's scandal with Morrison was included, stripped of its power to hurt by full exposure. I had a speech prepared, Eleanor told the gathered press later that morning, about family and truth and redemption. But standing here now, I realize there's only one thing that matters: love. Messy, complicated, imperfect love. The kind that makes you do crazy things like lie to protect people or tell the truth even when it hurts. Richard stood beside her, their first united front in weeks. Our son has 3 parents who love him, and somewhere in Seattle, I have a daughter who deserves to know her father. Today, we stop hiding. Today, we choose truth. Jamal's security company didn't collapse. Instead, it grew as clients appreciated his unwavering ethics in keeping family secrets even at personal cost. Sarah's career survived, transformed by her decision to help other professionals navigate ethical challenges. And Lucas? He gained not just an additional father, but a half-sister in Seattle, expanding his definition of family beyond anything he'd imagined. The Hart Mansion's library, once the scene of confrontations and ultimatums, became a weekly gathering place. Richard, Eleanor, and Jamal worked out a new normal, putting Lucas's needs first. They weren't a conventional family, but they were real scars, mistakes, and all. 1 year later, Lucas stood between his 3 parents at his middle school graduation. The whispers and stares had faded, replaced by understanding that family isn't defined by blood or society's expectations, but by love, forgiveness, and the courage to face truth together. Eleanor's final diary entry, shared with all 3 parents and both children, read, "The truth didn't destroy us, it set us free. Our greatest mistake wasn't loving too much, but thinking love needed protection from honesty. Today, we know better. Today, we are whole." The Los Angeles sunset painted the sky in colors of hope, as a family redefined by scandal emerged stronger, bound not by secrets, but by the choice to love openly, honestly, and completely.